September and onwards. So towards the end of September and in the month of October, there may not be rainfall and the almond crop would suffer. And for that, you need to go for supplementary irrigation. The objective of both the barrage in India and Bangladesh are supplementary irrigation. So you need to look into the objective of the project through which the water is diverted, and the problem with the Teesta has been created after India started diverting water, and then Bangladesh started diverting water. But the diversion takes place during the Kharif season, which is September, October, and November. In the dry season, only 6, 7, 8,000 cubic of water is there. And unfortunately, India unilaterally withdraws the entire flow, which is not acceptable ethically and not acceptable under any international law, even under Indian law, because India is expert on transboundary water management. Their publication on, or their 1958 law on transboundary water uses or interstate water uses also do not support this sort of diversion of water. So these are my opening remarks. Sharin, would you invite the speaker, or should I invite Saifullah bin Ansar to make his presentation?
Thank you so much, sir. There has been a small change. So the presenters at the last moment, they actually regretted. So we will directly move on to the discussion, and we have 3 discussants with us. Dr. Rohan De Souza. If you want, sir, I can call them upon, and then you can facilitate the discussion.
Let me have the privilege of inviting Dr. Rohan De Souza. Dr. Rohan, yes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Nishad. Again, I'm very grateful to the organizers for inviting me to speak on a theme which I must, with great humility, say that I lack the competence and the sort of informed opinions of Professor Ahmed and Professor Nishad, and I'm also seeing here Dr. Iftikhar Iqbal, and I'm really a small fry in terms of my understanding of this region and rivers. But given the fact that I have the floor for a few minutes, I'm going to make a few quick points with all humility. First of all, I think Professor Ahmed provides a very good philosophical vantage, that he sees that if we're going to have a discussion on these rivers, then we have to have a very careful understanding of knowledge and the politics of knowledge. Rivers get framed by engineers in a certain way, and they get framed by, I would say, historians and ecologists in a different way. And Professor Ahmed was very keenly telling us how, if we think of these rivers as webs, as Nodi, as drawing upon different kinds of philosophical and historical understanding, then the river itself looks very different. Yeah. But if we go by a certain engineering framing, then of course cusecs, megawatts, a very kind of powerful mathematical language that is used. But I think Professor Nishad was also hinting that these languages are not commensurate, that sometimes the way the engineer frames the problem is very different from the way philosophers and historians frame the problem, and therefore we mustn't mix up these languages. And so in the same spirit, I want to advance my few comments in that direction by saying that if we think very carefully, the border between, the political boundary between India and Bangladesh is not a natural one. Yeah, in many ways, it's not a natural boundary. Yeah, it is something that's constructed, that's created. But what is natural is the river and the geomorphological process of land building that the river does. Yeah, but we get two unnatural forces, so to speak, two nations talking about a natural phenomenon at one level. Yeah, so we have to be very attentive to this language. Nations tend to, governments, they tend to listen to their engineers. They're not listening to historians and to philosophers and to literatures in any fundamental sense. And when they talk to their engineers, the engineers basically have this very instrumental way of thinking about rivers. And I'm not surprised that they think of barrages and dams and wires. And then they often suggest that if you divert water to agriculturalists who maybe make monocrops such as almond or kharif, make rice, yeah, that this is a more productive use of water, and this is a more revenue generating, more calculating, more accountable way of understanding the use of the river. So in a way, engineers, farmers, and governments tend to come together about this river. But the people who are a natural community that tends to get left out of this are fisher communities. Now, the fisher communities, we know, have a very different understanding. They like variability. They like webs. They like the pulse. They like the movement of fish on the river. And the fish move according to certain kinds of rhythms. There is a high flood, there is a low flood, there is the marsh, there's the swamp, there's the mangrove. All of these are very, very, what do you call, they are very critical to how fish move, how protein, if you were to use another word, moves, yeah? And this is what fishing communities understand the river to be. So we have some contrast here between governments, engineers, irrigators, that is farmers in a well, whatever you want to say, who are into monocropping, who can, turn that river into kind of a steroidal kind of push for their incomes, yeah. And then you have fishing communities who need the water, and they need it to be uneven and in kind of different pulses. Flood is not necessarily a bad thing for fishing communities. So what I'm saying is, let us be very attentive to whose language is being used to define the problem. We should not mix engineering language with, the concepts and categories of other communities and of other imaginations about these rivers. So my understanding is that if we think of the Teesta as a problem between between Bangladesh and India, then sometimes we talk the engineering language and we all get kind of caught in that. There's no solution, actually no way out in one way. But if we think like fishing communities and we think like fish in some ways, then we see this problem differently. And this is a kind of ecological argument in which we say fishing communities talk about adapting to a geomorphological process. They have a certain understanding of an ecological and environmental health of the river. But if we are going to talk about political borders, which are not natural, which are actually something that we construct, and then we talk about these two interests of these two huge, massive countries and their engineering establishments, both of which, I must add, engineers have been trained, our civil engineering traditions come from the colonial history, colonial past. So both those engineers speak the same language, actually, while fishing communities will be, very specific to their niche and their own particular traditions and histories. So what I want to end up with saying is that if we make sure we use the language and concepts and categories that are relevant to fishing communities, then we might have a very different way of understanding this challenge. Yeah. And I would say that like what is happening in the Indus system, India is arguing for hydroelectricity, the farming communities in the middle reaches of Pakistan are arguing for irrigation, and the fishing communities in the delta want fish, and they want water, and they want floods. So how is this conversation going to happen if we look at it as ecological units? Yeah. If you look at ecological units, then I would say the fishing community has to have a big voice in deciding the future of these rivers. A voice big enough that is equivalent to the engineers and equivalent to how governments make their choices and decisions. Yeah. So let me just quickly end. I think my 10 minutes are up. I'm so sorry. It was unstructured. It was off the cuff. I didn't really think much other than responding to the wonderful presentations of Professor Ahmed and Professor Nishad, who I learned a great deal from in their very short talks. So I should end by simply saying that, I don't think this is really something to be framed as a tension between two nations. I think this has to be framed as a puzzle and as a challenge between different natural communities who inhabit these rivers. And if you want to divert Teesta water to cities for urban consumption, you want to divert Teesta waters to farming, then you will compromise the rights of fishing communities. And if that is the case, then they have to have a stake in deciding on lots of these issues. Yeah. And on that note, I should end. And lastly, I should say something at the end. One of the points that really needs to be emphasized, and this is how an engineering mindset operates. They usually use this word average flows, which is a complete misnomer. There is no such thing as an average flow. Yeah. You can have decades of data on all these rivers, and they keep claiming that there's not enough hydraulic data on the Teesta. But on all the rivers, I would say, there is no such thing as an average flow. In fact, there is no average flow because variability is an important aspect of the river. It is its entire life energy comes from variability, not from average. And so if we fundamentally recognize that there is no such thing as an average flow, because once they get the average flow, then they decide who gets what share. This is a slight, it's like saying in our classroom that there's an average student. There is no such thing as an average student, frankly speaking, in my opinion. Yeah, right? So I should say that one of the first critiques that we should make is not only to get a big voice for the fishing communities, but also challenge very carefully and credibly the whole issue of the average flow. And lastly, this is not between nations. This is between ecosystems and ecological communities. Yeah, I hope that's the best I can do right now. But again, thank you so much for this opportunity. And it was lovely to listen to Professor Ahmed and to Professor Nishad. Yeah, thank you.
Nishad sir, I think you're muted.
Bhai, you are muted.
Yeah,
Now it's okay.
my apologies. It's my privilege now to invite Ashok. Ashok Swine, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am here.
Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Anu. Thank you for inviting me here. I don't know what I'm doing, frankly, in this panel, because as Rohan was saying, I know a little bit of history, but I don't know anything about the morphology or geology or whatever we call it. I'm a student of political science. I know politics a little bit, and that I can tell whatever we want to hear. But I will respond to. I was listening to Imtiaz and also listening to Ainun, and I think these are the extremely interesting discussions. And of course, Rohan's intervention was quite, pertinent to think of in this context, that what we really need to look at. But I will do some straight talking. That's as always I think I should do, and I've been doing. I think we need to realize that there is a lack of trust between the two countries. We all know that this is a basin. If you look at the Teesta Basin specifically, of course, it's between India and Bangladesh. But if you put it together in the Ganges-Brahmaputra Basin, of course, the number of other factors comes in, number of other countries come in. But in this context, we need to look at it that if we look at Teesta specifically, there is a lack of trust between the two countries to go for an agreement. And this is happening for a long period of time. And if you go back to the 1996 India-Ganges agreement, and we know very well that there is a change of leadership which took place in both the countries, in India and Bangladesh, and that led to an agreement despite the fact that there was not enough water in the system as they claim to get it. And we all know these things. So there is a need for the leadership in both the countries to come into an agreement to get that kind of point that yes, this is what we need to do. All these kind of discussions, all these kind of things, which will be, but I think we need to really look at how the top leadership behaves. Saying that, I think we also need to find out that what is happening, all this kind of messaging or the kind of information, the kind of ways we look at it, whether this the Chinese money coming in, or whether there is no information, or what India is doing. But I think we need to look at it in both the countries. Both the countries have suffered democratically quite significantly. Of course, both countries are going in different direction in other ways. Of course, economically, Bangladesh is doing well than India. There is a secular sort of mindset in the Bangladesh compared to a different type of Hindu chauvinist ideas going on in India. But I think if you look at the democracy as such, both the countries have suffered. Both the countries, we are seeing a deteriorating trend of the democracy, and that really that impacts the way we interact. That impacts the way the interaction taking place within the country and with other countries, or with the neighboring country. And I think we need to get that to this, that we see the real the problem where the lies, that why we are unable to hear what is going on, what kind of decision making taking place, why people are not being part of it. What Oinun was saying, if he doesn't know what is happening on this issue, who will know it? And who knows about it? And I think this is something exactly the similar thing is happening in the Indian context. I mean, look at I have gone to this Teesta upstream by road. I also did some of the work, I was evaluating some projects there where there have been also protests upstream by the indigenous people, those who are affected by the dam. Of course, these dams, there is no water transfer will take place. That you can see, but there will be water storage, water blockage. There water will be transferred to some urban expansion, and also there will be evaporation. Those are the things which we need to also look at it. That those are the areas. But these discussions need to be in an open space where both the countries need to sit down together, can have the discussions which we think we need that in that context. But that is not happening. And that hasn't happened because I think due to the lack of that kind of mindset at the top level to do this cooperation. Saying that, I think there is also, we also need to realize that the changing politics in India, or particularly the local politics or subnational politics in India, also affects quite a lot, which we have seen, not only the bilateral relationship with Bangladesh on the water issue, but on all kinds of issues. Similarly, also the India's subnational issues affect relationship with Nepal, affects relations with Bhutan, affects relationship with Pakistan and Sri Lanka, you name it. I mean, all these things where the India looks at its subnational issues to be while defining its relationship with the bilateral, neighboring countries. With the India's relationship with Bangladesh, particularly on the water issue on this side, is extremely dependent on how the politics works in West Bengal. And the West Bengal politics has really, I mean, I think Imtiaz was explaining it quite well. I mean, that how that has really blocked this issue of moving out, even if there is a pretension in Delhi that they really wanted to do it. But I think it is getting much more difficult in West Bengal now. And we need to realize that the West Bengal politics is not the same as it was a few years ago. This is now, the Mamata Banerjee party, and the other one is the BJP. So the way it will be that the both will be each other putting some, because if they are competing in West Bengal votes or West Bengal politics, they will be using Teesta more for their own political benefits than what it used to be before, when BJP was not party in the West Bengal. So it will be much more difficult to find out or to get that kind of subnational politics out of that kind of conflict region, and to look for a kind at the national level. And I think that those understanding needs to be at the Bangladesh side, that things have become much more complicated now than what it used to be 10 years back. So how we really look at it, what kind of future we should look. I mean, I'm not I'm not a student of astrology. That's what has become fashion now in India. But if you want to really look at the situation there, I think we need to see that there is only one thing which I see, that of course both India and Bangladesh moving towards certain kind of democratic values, ideas and norms, and those what we should be as the countries in this region, and at least we have been doing that, moving into that. But I think also need to look at it, the basin or the Teesta, in the context of a larger basin-based framework. And with that, possibly there will be a certain kind of agreements can be possible signed. And I think I have been advocating it, because the reason, if you look at it, China is the key. So if coming back to the China factor, if China might not be directly a riparian in the Teesta Basin, but China controls a number of factors. And if India looks to China to contain China in this context, has a number of ways to create, or a number of incentives to work together with Bangladesh, with Nepal, with Bhutan, to create a kind of sub-basin cooperation. What we have seen in the Mekong, that has worked in many ways in initial years. That we see in some parts of Nile Basin, it has worked in some parts of, that's not the fantastic way of cooperation unless all countries come together. But in some sense, it will be India's interest to look at it if the Teesta can pave the way for a larger sub-basin based cooperation. In that context, probably some good sense will prevail. But at this point, I do see that we are in a very tough spot, how we can really look at it and how we can possibly hope for an agreement happening in Teesta, unless some good sense prevails on the just because of the fear of China. I will stop there.
Bhai, you are muted. Okay. We have Inu Bhai hand. Anand Bhai.
You want to take the floor now?
I like to say a few words, if you allow.
Right now or after Iftikhar Iqbal?
After Iftikhar Iqbal.
Okay, Iftikhar Iqbal, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Good day, everyone, and thank you, Action Aid, for kind invitation to join this very significant conference. This conference is mainly concerned with the challenges facing the Teesta River and ways to overcoming them. And there is little left for me to add to what Professor Nishat, Professor Imtiaz, my fellow panelists have already so eloquently presented. I'll just make some passing comments, which could be the footnotes of the conversation so far. To me, there are 4 major challenges, of which one is more or less natural, and the 3 are anthropogenic. The first one, I should say, relates to hydrological and geomorphological changes, as Professor Nishat discussed and elaborated. Just to add to that, I think geological issues are also, I think, rather invisibly informing some of the issues of lateral movement of Teesta. For example, the river bank erosion might be connected to the more long-term and ongoing tectonic activity, in particular the subduction of the Indian plate under the Western Burma plate. And this means perhaps the same reason for which Ganga joined Brahmaputra. Teesta also probably joined for the same reason to Brahmaputra. As Professor Nishat was saying previously, Teesta was flowing to Ganga, but just little addendum is that, as Rennell in late 18th century noted this interesting phenomena, that this was happening only during the dry season. 3 of Teesta's channels were flowing to Ganga, but in the flat season, in monsoon, Ganga was flowing to Teesta, but all that changes, and Teesta is now part of Brahmaputra. But what does mean is that the erosion is something that is going to happen, and the news that we see in the TV and the social media and the newspaper, I think if the government decides not in 5 or 10 years, but at least 200 to 300 years, looking back at the history of the lateral movement, I think we don't have to see people and peasants and fishermen is showing their disheartened situation. So I think they should plan, the government should plan for the next 200-300 years, so that along with the property rights, along with the welfare bundles, along with the possibilities of fishing, as Dr. Rohan was suggesting, I think the government, if it wants, it can mitigate the problems of the people who are living in Teesta by looking ahead, moving them, resettling them along with welfare bundles. So this is one of the issues that natural, that we cannot do anything. This is natural, but human, I think, governance can heal greatly in that context. And secondly, I think the second challenge relates to more recent history. There is this pitfalls of the ecologically insensitive partitions in 1947 and its current subsequent and current geostrategic implications in the particular context of transboundary rivers, including Ganga, Brahmaputra, and Teesta, and Gomti, and so on. The true nature of this challenge will unfold, of course, as Bangladesh braces to be the site of Indo-China conflicts over Teesta. If we really belittle it or not, I think something is brewing, and I believe something. When India says that Chinese engineers cannot work in the border, that implies a lot of tensions, I think, coming up. But hopefully, if we join Professor Imtiaz, hopefully that can be translated into win-win situation. Another set of anthropogenic challenges relates to, of course, the dams, constructions, and infrastructural developments over the Teesta. And it's crucial to understand that the critical conjuncture of capital investments and hydro technologies that are put into the multi-purpose dam constructions. And Professor Rohan De Souza has brilliant contribution on these for some time now. Now to the fourth challenge and last for me, as really we don't have much time. This is linked to the third one, that is the dam, but which also takes us beyond the issue of engineering and philosophical or even political, national political space. This is the crux of what we have been doing or we can do to Teesta. This is the challenge of developmentalism. And if you can say the challenge of growth syndrome. Now, the most visible development milestones of Bangladesh. Shall I go on? Okay. The most visible development milestone for Bangladesh is 2041, when it aspires to be a developed country, whatever that means. It is in this context, by the same year, 2041, the demand for electricity is projected to be 50 gigawatts for Bangladesh. Now, this is way more than Teesta or Tipaimukh dams can supply. For example, the full hydroelectric potential of Sikkim is less than 5 gigawatt. Whether it is 31 dams or not, or in planning or in operation or commission, not more than 5 gigawatts. In fact, Bangladesh's energy demand of 50 gigawatt is more than half of what the entire Indian hydroelectric dams can produce, which is locked at about 84 gigawatt. Now, what is the implication of this? This means Bangladesh is desperate to continue to depend on the electricity generated in the Indian side. And in the side of the rivers and in the name of national economic growth. So perhaps India is here receiving, I'm not sure, it might sound naive, my personal opinion, that India is probably getting a tacit legitimacy to go on with its dam building projects. And this might be the real reason why viable solutions to water sharing of Teesta, and for that matter, Tipaimukh, have been hanging on the balance. And I'm not going into Indian side of the story, capitalist investment and all these things. I'm just talking from Bangladesh point of view. So in a way, both West Bengal and Bangladesh governments speak about agriculture and well-being, human well-being connected to Teesta, but the elephant of the battle remains invisible, I think. So I will stop just maybe a few seconds. I think, so the main challenge is to identify, understand, and engage the hydro energy regime, I think here, political economy, beyond engineering and governance and all this. In other words, it is clear that the problem is not primarily between India and Bangladesh or even China, but I think between the people of Teesta, including those what Professor Rohan De Souza was talking about, the fishermen and the agricultural and the peasants and cultivators. And so this is between the people of Teesta and the hydro energy regime on both sides of the border. I'm not just talking about India or Bangladesh, both sides of the border. And to me, the solution to some of these challenges, I think, lies in both the government's decision on whose side they take, Teesta people or the development energy regime. So that's, I think, something, as I said, might sound a bit naive, but this is my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think you have brought in a very interesting topic, which is hydroelectricity. And in fact, the position of government of Bangladesh is to go for production of hydroelectricity jointly. So Prime Minister of Bangladesh is ready to invest in projects in Arunachal or Assam and Sikkim and Nepal and Bhutan to have equity partnership in hydropower production. So your point is valid, but I never thought that this electricity generation is something which is blocking the progress in decision taking in the Teesta River. But interesting and excellent point. May I now invite Inu, Hasanul Haq Inu?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Anishal Bhai. I have been listening carefully to the panelists and especially you and of course Dr. Imtiaz. The water issue in the subcontinent, especially Bangladesh and India, for the many years, we have been discussing for a solution. The solution is sharing of water at the border point. That is one issue that is highlighted for the last many years. Then another issue is, beside that, is management of water and ecosystem. That is a completely different issue. The rivers coming out from the Himalayas into Bangladesh. So the issues are sharing of water at the border point, to find a solution to have enough water for both the countries in the dry season, to find a solution to manage water during the monsoon season for both the countries, and lastly, for Bangladesh, management within Bangladesh. So I look at this point in this way, and even for Indian side, when the Teesta comes down from the hill into the plains of West Bengal, Shiliguri, Jalpaiguri, they are complaining that by flash floods, they are also devastated. And even in the dry season, they are lacking water also, as we have in Bangladesh. So to cut the long story short, Dr. Nishat has correctly said, after many years, both Sheikh Hasina and Manmohan Singh in 2011 in Article 2 mentioned about the basin-wise water resource development. This element was inserted. That is the first time the India-Bangladesh agreed on the basin-wise water development. What Dr. Iftikhar is saying, well, it is not only the question of water, it is a question of water resources management. So it is a multi-dimensional economic management of the whole water in the basins of Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna, Teesta. That is the position. So since technically for many years in Indian technologies were not agreeing to the basin-wise development, but recently, I think technically, all the technical communities have agreed the only solution to save the ecology and the nature and the climate change effect is to go for basin-wise water management development. Neither in Bangladesh, neither in India, the politicians shouts on this particular issue. We always say, let us share waters of the 54 rivers at the border point, but that is not a solution. If we have a sharing at the border point of Teesta, right now, Bangladesh cannot have sufficient water in the dry season and cannot manage the flash floods coming water from the heavy monsoons in the rainy season. So, well, another issue is delinking of politics. So water management should have a delinking of the political thinking. Technical solution, ecological solution, multidimensional solution needs to get priority. So my proposal is very good, simple. Let us look beyond sharing of water to basin-wise management of Teesta. That can also take care of the hydro energy also and other development activities, including management of ecology and also the water problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So according to the program, is an opportunity for question and answer. So if there is any question or anyone who wants to make any remarks, the floor would be open for him or her. Assuming late in the day we close up, so I will have 3-4 minutes of comments and then hand it over to Shahrin for as master of the ceremony.
There are a
My,
few questions in the chat box. I don't know if Shireen, you want to read them out?
Sure, Appa. So many of them have been addressed already, but just one point, Mr. Saiful Islam Rahman is saying, but only due to conflict of politics between West Bengal and the central government of India, how long Bangladesh should suffer? Should we extend our diplomacy with West Bengal on the and the central government of India separately now? If anyone wants to address that.
Fiyaz, would you like to take it up, or Ashok? Please go ahead.
Maybe Ashok go first.
Why? Okay. No, I think it is whether it is right or wrong. There is no point. I mean, we all know that it's not right, but that is the fact. The fact is the Teesta River issue hasn't come into a kind of a negotiated settlement, and not only Teesta, but also you will come to see also in the Ganges River when the 96 agreements comes to an end in a few years, 4 years, you will realize what's the problem is waiting for you. So this is not the end, but it is a fact that the West Bengal politics has become a huge hindrance of water sharing, particularly from of your western side of the border. So in this context, what to do? I think it is important to have the kind of contact which before you used to have. I mean, Jyoti Basu played a significant role in 1996 agreement, and there is a way also to reach out. I think there is a good relationship between your Prime Minister and West Bengal Chief Minister. So there is a possibility there, but how far the political leadership is going beyond that kind of politics and really looking at the larger regional and the national interests, that's a matter of point. Unfortunately, these days, the leaders don't have that kind of big hat. They are exactly looking at their own political interest, looking at the larger national or regional interest or people's interest. And I think saying that, I think I'll just give one quick reflection on the taking politics out of water management. That has been the dream of every water management specialist for ages. That will never happen. That is not going to happen. You have to deal with politics. Politics cannot be taken out. Without politics, you cannot manage. Don't stay in that kind of illusion.
Thank you. Imtiaz, would you like to supplement?
Thank you. No, I just, I guess an issue of mindset is a critical one. And there are more interactions, I think, more discussions. Whatever I was flagging was common knowledge, nothing out of the box. But the very idea that humans can change nature, if that gets registered, starting way up in the Sikkim, where the melting of glacier creates Teesta, and of course, as it comes down. And I go back to the idea that Jayanta Bandyopadhyay put it very succinctly about what river is all about, and this very idea of webs. Unless we go in that direction, I see no way out of it. One can wait for technology to change. I guess humans have enormous capacity to be equally creative and come out of kind of what you call a relationship which maybe we can't even foresee now. The very fact that we are all talking online on internet and this is well connected throughout the world. Nobody even thought about this 20 years back or even earlier. But now it's a technology which has changed, which makes that Bangladeshis can talk to people in West Bengal, and I hope some of them are listening to what is being discussed here. And at the same time, you can have people from from Japan, from Sweden, and other places. So I have hope. As I said, I have enormous hope on humans in transforming things. And then, as I said, this very fact that humans can change nature also tells you that humans can also go in a different direction and make it better, as Rohan was arguing about the fishermen, and some of the work that Ashok has done on issues of people who got affected in the Sikkim area. So I literally have hope on this. I think we need to go beyond disciplines. I think all disciplines are important. There's no point in belittling one discipline and saying that this is the one that's going to solve the problem. I don't think we are in that boat. So we want to go beyond, as I use the word post-discipline. That kind of post-disciplinary way out probably can create something different. Somebody asked me earlier on the issue of niche diplomacy, where middle power plays a role and hardly has any interest in global global power setup. As I said, Bangladesh's development history is development without enemies. We literally don't have enemies, and there are one or two countries in Africa in that situation, but bulk of the countries in the world, they have enemies and they try to match up whatever they're doing. Now, in that case, Bangladesh, I would say, is an exception, and that's the reason why the foreign policy principle to us is so important. Now, whether that principle can deliver better results in the Teesta, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I think we need to trust humans. I think there's enormous relationship, historical relationship with India. I see no reason why that will get derailed because of Teesta. But then, if we can't resolve the issue, there has to be a way out, at least a short-term way out. And I was flagging some of the short-term ideas that have come up, but I still hold to my idea of Nodi as Pran, Atta, and Shakti, and of course webs. When that will happen, probably things would be much better.
Thank you. Farah Kabir, you wanted to say something.
Thank you, Professor Nishad. No, it's been a very interesting conversation so far, and I want to just bring in that there was a resignation that erosions will happen, climate change will happen, and at the same time, we will have a developmentalist approach. Now, how does this sit or fit with the climate emergency and the planetary crisis and the climate politics? So this is something I would like to hear from you, Professor Nishad, or anyone else who wants to speak. And also, if Bangladesh is looking at graduating in 2041, and it will have a greater demand for electricity, are we going to continue with the traditional sources of energy and electricity? Because here we are talking about being champions of climate change and climate justice and adaptation. So will there be alternatives also coming into this conversation? Or do we need to compartmentalize and keep them separate, which we have done in the past and has been also responsible for some of the problems that we are facing today? So I was hoping to hear from all of you on any of this, because, yeah, thank you.
Anybody want to take this question? Possibly time is running out, so let me try to say something, and I'll also give my views on Farah Kabir's
Nishad bhai, Sharin-er হাত আছে।
Sharin-er হাত দেখতে পাচ্ছি না। Okay, Sharin, you have the floor.
জি স্যার, একটা আমাদের কমিউনিটির যারা রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভ ছিল, ওনারা জাস্ট একটা বিষয়ে বলতে চাচ্ছেন যে তিস্তা ছোট্ট নদী তিস্তার সাথে ধরলা নদীটাও তাদের প্রাণের সাথে তাদের জীবনের সাথে অনেক বড়ভাবে যুক্ত। সো ধরলাকে নিয়েও আলোচনাটা একটু বাড়ানো যায় কিনা বা এই প্ল্যাটফর্মে সেই বিষয়ে একটু আলোচনা করা যায় কিনা সেটা তারা জানতে চাচ্ছিলেন। থ্যাংক ইউ।
তিস্তা, ধরলা, দুধকুমার তিনটা টোটালি আলাদা নদী, একটার সাথে আরেকটার কোনো লিঙ্ক নাই। এর মধ্যে তিস্তা হচ্ছে সিকিম থেকে উৎপত্তি, অর্থাৎ ভারতের একটা প্রদেশ থেকে, একটা স্টেট থেকে উৎপত্তি হয়ে বাংলাদেশে ঢুকেছে। কিন্তু ধরলা এবং দুধকুমারের প্রবলেম অন্যরকম। এই দুটো নদীরই উৎপত্তি হচ্ছে ভুটানে, ভুটান থেকে ভারত, ভারত থেকে বাংলাদেশ। কাজেই পলিটিক্যাল অ্যাঙ্গেল থেকে ধরলা আর তিস্তার সলিউশন উড বি টোটালি ডিফারেন্ট, বাট সলিউশনটা হচ্ছে ওই যে বেসিন ওয়াইড অ্যাপ্রোচ, অর্থাৎ তিস্তা নিয়ে দুটো দেশের প্রতিনিধিরা কথা বলবে এবং ধরলা এবং দুধকুমারের ক্ষেত্রে ভুটান একটা তৃতীয় পার্টি হবে। ওকে, তাহলে আমি একটু মুভ করি। প্রথম কথা হচ্ছে যেভাবে এখন থেকে 50 বছর আগে কিংবা 100 বছর আগে ডেভেলপমেন্ট প্ল্যানিং হতো, এখন সেটা নেই, এখন বদলে গেছে। ইউ হ্যাভ টু রিকগনাইজ দ্যাট। Engineers, I'm an engineer and I'm a proud engineer and a proud civil engineer. আমাদের সময় নেচারের প্রতি ইন্টারভেন করে মানুষকে কিভাবে বেনিফিট দেয়া যায়, এটাই ছিল মোটামুটি উদ্দেশ্য। এর মধ্যে প্রকৃতি ছিল না। কিন্তু এখন প্রফেশনালি we pay full attention to ecosystem and ecology and human being and মানুষের need, participatory approach, etc. So আজকে যেমন তিস্তাতে কি হচ্ছে আমি পুরোপুরি জানি না। Sorry, I should be talking in English. My point is that in earlier days, civil engineering was more in construction and interfering with nature so that it brings some benefit to people. And that was a very narrow concept. But now, so over the last 20 years, 30 years, the whole thing has changed. You have to have a holistic approach. The civil engineer has to, or planners or whoever is approving a project, have to pay attention to ecosystem. That is also the need in Bangladesh through constitutional requirement, but it is not followed. Who breaks it? It is the politicians. I see there, so is the policymakers, the bureaucrats who finally takes decision. Is not the engineer or not the economist who takes the final decision. The decision is taken by bureaucrats and politicians that this is what we want. As for example, one of the reason for these rivers of Bangladesh being destroyed is construction of so many bridges and culverts, mostly culverts. And these are done by local political masters. They give a dam to the stability of the river and need of the river. But the law says you have to pay full attention to river, the ecosystem of river. In one of such session, I said the Chinese proposal or the proposal of Bangladesh, which they're going to construct through China. And I don't think you need Chinese technological knowledge to do what is being proposed. Whatever I know, it could very well be done by Bangladeshi contractor, but it should not be done because it will kill the entire ecosystem, the entire river system. It would be converted into a series of, shall I say, patches of canal or patches of river. And so environmental impact assessment, social impact assessment, gender issue of youth, these are now the call of the day. National adaptation, I will now address to Farah Kabir. NAP is going to be prepared. And the condition under which the NAP should be prepared, the first condition, it should be country driven. And in the morning, I was in another session and I rebuked UNDP because they decide what should be done. That's wrong. That's wrong for the government to accept also. The government being very weak. UNDP has collected money from GCF and is spending the money at their will. The country should understand what is the requirement of the law of the land. The Supreme Court judges gave their decision, but before that, in 2011, the Parliament formulated Article 18A. The world is now saying your action should be country-driven. Second step, it should be gender sensitive. Third point, it should pay attention to the need of the youth, which means the future generation. The next requirement, it should be ecosystem-based approach. So that's the requirement. And in November 2021, a lot of people are not happy, does not matter. But the rule book of Paris Agreement has been finalized. And in the Cancun Agreement, which was produced after failure of the Copenhagen, all these conditions have been put in. So if we follow what the world wants now, obviously you will pay attention to the need of the fishermen, you will pay attention to the need of the turtles and the insects and other things. In one of the meetings when I said in Teesta, somebody said, oh, there is no navigation. I think there was navigation, it has been killed. And the fish, there are many varieties, and in the short film we saw, there were mention of baghai and mention of few other species of fish in the Teesta. But the fish I like is called boirali or piali in Shirazganj. So time has come, we change our approach, which is the legal requirement in the country, and we go for basin approach. Now in 2011, the two prime ministers signed the agreement that basin approach should be followed. Has anything been done on that? Answer is no. Let me correct my answer. Answer is no, nothing has been done in Bangladesh. But from the Indian side, in last 1 month, I think there has been 2 or 3 workshops in India and 1 workshop in Bangladesh. Imtiaz and I were invited, and Imtiaz was scared to go for in COVID situation, and I blindly followed him. I also didn't participate, but I understand there were 2-3 participants from Bangladesh. On the Indian side, they want to understand what is meant by basin approach. I find that question to be funny, because how water should be managed and developed, that science has been developed in India in the 18th and 19th century by the British engineers working in India and the Indian engineers working over there. Roorkee is the central point. And from there, the knowledge went to Russia and Egypt and USA. So they want our explanation what we meant by basin approach. Rather, Bangladesh should ask India, please guide us in following the holistic approach and the basin approach. So if we do the environmental impact assessment correctly, as per the law of the land, then most of these questions would be answered and resolved. These were the questions, or these problems arose because 50 years back, we did not pay any attention to that. I like this point of average flow to the issue. It is only the stupids or stupid engineers who talk about average flow. No engineer should talk about average flow. It is the extreme flows, either the maximum or the minimum. Design is never done on the basis of average flow. Planning is done based on average flow. That's wrong. So this point about average flow versus extreme flow is a very valid one, and I'm sure the participants who are listening to it would keep in mind the whole thing. I find very interesting example given about Pakistan and India about Indus. when the infrastructures in India was constructed, in Pakistan, the Ghulam Muhammad Barrage and Sakkar Barrage in British period, there was no consideration for neither for navigation nor for fish. The river became totally dry after the two barrages. If those barrages were built today, definitely it would have been built differently. Same thing in Bangladesh. If we had built the Teesta barrage today, definitely we would have done it differently. But I explained earlier, the whole planning process was, or the design was for supplementary irrigation, that is provide water during the monsoon month. So let me conclude by saying that I noticed there is strong support for holistic approach, basin-wide approach, strong support for ecosystem, strong support for overall management of the infrastructure that needs to be constructed. You just cannot leave. You have to have some kind of intervention, but that intervention should be environment friendly and taking into account the environmental consideration. That we have not done so far does not mean that it cannot be done in future. And climate change is going to change the entire hydrological cycle. Water availability would totally be changed. And as for example, if you see the flood in Teesta that happened, I think in October, this should be studied in depth because this was a peculiar, a freak event. The previous situation was in 1968 when the river Teesta left its course and started moving towards Bihar. That was about to happen in Bangladesh. The Teesta was about to leave the course and go towards Lalmonirhat. So we need to study the extreme events, which would be a result of climate change. So as we plan for future, definitely climate change should be factorized in, but the way we have done our development definitely was not correct, but we did not have the knowledge. So absence of knowledge should not be, we should not accuse them. Now we have the knowledge, we have the understanding, and we should follow the current approach where these environmental issues are taken on board, and we have ecosystem-based approach, community-based approach. All kinds of slogans are being used, but we need to translate them into real work. Slogans are good, but not enough. Let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Nishad, for the concluding remarks and for moderating the session throughout. With that, I would like to end the session here, and my heartfelt thank you to every one of you, especially Professor Nishad, Professor Imtiaz, Mr. Hassanul Haq Inu, for staying there throughout the session with us, and all the designated discussants for being with us. This brings us to the end of the first thematic session, but tomorrow at 10 a.m. we will have another thematic session on structural interventions and geopolitics. Although we have talked about a lot about geopolitics in this session, since when Teesta comes on the table, we cannot have any discussion without the structural intervention and geopolitics part. So we hope to see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bangladesh time, and then we will have another session tomorrow from 3 p.m. Bangladesh time, which is on the human ecosystem and gender implications. So before we all conclude the session, can I ask every one of you to please again turn on the video for us to take a final group photo for us. Thank you so much.
Everybody's so seriously silent. So let me also join Shireen in thanking all of you for being with us. And this been thought-provoking and also, challenging. And I hope to the next few days, couple of days, the sessions will be of equally interest, and you will join us and contribute. Really look forward to tomorrow and Saturday. So we're done with the photo, Shireen? Thank
I believe
you.
so. Thank you
Please
so much,
encourage
everyone.
others to join as well. Thank you, Sharin.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, everyone.
Recording stopped.
Khuda Hafiz.